Hi, everyone. My name is Marta Ronquillo Newhart, and the panel that you're viewing today is Women Leading Boards and the increasing role that women are playing on boards and moving up the value stream. We have an incredible set of panelists here today, and I'm sure you're going to walk away with some incredible information, and you're going to learn some things that you might not have learned already, but it's going to build on what you heard earlier today. I'm going to start with introducing everyone. I'm going to ask each one of the panelists, starting with Betsy Berkhemer-Credaire, to just take a few seconds and tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you, Marta. So glad to be here with the Women's Business Collaborative. I'm in Los Angeles. I'm the CEO of 50/50 Women on Boards. We are the pipeline builders. We educate women on how to get themselves onto corporate boards through their own networks and how to present themselves. My background is certainly appropriate. I own a retained executive search firm, Berkhemer-Credaire in Los Angeles. I'm also the author of the book, Winning the Board Game. I just happen to have a little commercial here. And then I'm responsible for the law in California, SB 826, you may have heard of, which passed and was enacted in January of 2019, requiring 3 women on every corporate board in California. And I'll give you some updates on that later. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Betsy. And by the way, I've read that book, everybody. It's worth it. For those of you that are seeking board membership and those of you that are on boards, it's a really good book. Okay, Jennifer Reynolds, tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Marta. Well, delighted to be here as well. I'm the CEO of an organization called Women Corporate Director Foundation. It's a network of 2,500 women corporate directors around the world. About half of those are in the US and the other half are spread over 5 continents. So a very, very diverse group of women. And clearly we are supporting our corporate directors in their board careers and working to get them on new boards and advocating for better diversity on boards generally. I'm also a corporate director on an publicly traded insurance company, on an publicly traded ag tech company, and then an organization called Canada Development Investment Corporations, very active on the corporate governance front as well. And my background is financial services for 25 years. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. It's really good to see you, Jennifer. And then we're going to go over to Ozzie Meza, who is the acting CEO of the Latino Corporate Directors Association. Tell us about you, Ozzie.
Thank you, Marta and Betsy and Jennifer. It's great to be with you in this conversation. So as Marta shared, I am the acting president and CEO of Latino Corporate Directors Association. Currently, I live in Reno, Nevada. So if there's anyone in Nevada, please come and say hello. And the organization is very committed to developing, supporting, and increasing Latino representation on corporate boards, both for male and female. In addition to that, we advocate and become a resource to search firms, private equities, and others to ensure that they have access to talent. And my background is in executive search, specifically in talent intelligence. I'm a librarian by trade. So for me, the hunt for talent is always very important, and hence why the work that LCDA is leading is very meaningful to me. I'm also an associate board member of the Association of LGBTQ Corporate Directors. So as you can see, elevating underrepresented voices is very important to the work that I do.
This is a real powerhouse panel. As I said, my name is Marta Ronquillo Newhart. I've worked in 4 Fortune 100 companies, 1 Dow component, and 3 NASDAQ companies in aerospace, energy, and in HVAC services as well. So let's talk a little bit about who you have in front of you just for a minute, because they gave you a snapshot of who they are. But I want to say a couple of things here. Betsy mentioned she's the leader behind SB 826. This is no small deal. This is a historic California law that requires specific number of women on boards if you're headquartered in California. I don't know what's harder, to climb Mount Everest, move a mountain, or get this bill passed. My guess is probably getting this bill passed. That's revolutionary. And then Jennifer, who mentioned she's the CEO of the Women's Directors Foundation, they're serving 2,580 members, and this is relevant to 8,500 boards. Look, that's impact. That's major. And Ozzie of the LCDA, if the LCDA is the body, Ozzie's the heart that pumps the blood through it. He's our organization. And so you can see here, you have three powerhouses in front of you. Okay, I want to talk a minute about context, because this is important before we start talking a little bit about stats. And Betsy, I'm going to go to you first, but I'm going to talk a minute about the growing geopolitical risk, disruption, the global economy, the new phase of the Ukraine war. These are all new things that companies are dealing with. Why is this significant? Because it requires new leadership. It requires a new way of thinking that we didn't have to have 3 years ago. How does this relate to women on boards? Women are moving up the value stream on boards. Women are now getting into more leadership roles on boards, becoming the chair. They're the chair of the non-gov committee, of the risk and audit committees, the comp committees. These are really significant. And Betsy's organization has released some information this week. I think it was on Tuesday, regarding where we are now on the number of women on boards in the US. Betsy, can you share that data with us?
Love to, Marta, and the report is accessible online at our website, 5050wob.com, standing for 50-50 women on boards, which is of course our goal. And we're still far away from that goal. Our research is our annual report came out just 2 days ago. Is today Thursday? Yeah, Tuesday, and announcing that the nationwide percentage of women on corporate boards of all racial backgrounds is now 29%. Again, a far cry from 50, but it's only 1 percentage point improvement since last year as of June 30th. And we at 50-50 Women on Boards analyze and report on these results from the Russell 3000 companies. So that's why this is the largest sample of companies. It's not just the Fortune 1000 or the S&P 1500. It's Russell 3000 companies. So to have achieved 29% is an accomplishment, since back in 2010, when 50-50 Women on Board started the research, the number was 10%. So we've gone a huge leap to 29%, but the pace, what we learned this year, is slowed down, and we only increased that 1% from 28 to 29 nationwide in the Russell 3000 boards, which is the slowest pace of any year of the last 5 years.
Why do you think that is, Betsy?
Well, I think there are
any insight?
Yeah, I suppose so. We need to keep the foot on the gas pedal, as they say, but we need to keep educating more women. We need more women in our pipeline who attend our workshops and attend our 20 city events, which are networking and educational events that we do throughout the year. And we still have several coming up, all listed on our website, culminating in New York on November 7th. And then we have a global broadcast of the global of leaders, leading global companies, women, on November 14th. That culminates our year. So if more women participate in talking about themselves, strategically networking among their own contacts, it's still going to continue to build the pipeline. But we also feel that perhaps some boards have gone from no women to 3 or 4, and they might think that they've met what their expectation is. They don't know, or they don't think that it's
not enough
gender balance. Exactly. So, but the good sign is that at least half of the Russell 3000 have at 3 or more or gender balanced boards, but the lower half still have 2, 1, or no women on their boards. There are still 457 companies with only 1 or women on their board.
Lots of room for improvement. And what I like about what you said, Betsy, is about getting the right exposure, the right networking, and the events that you and your team are holding are doing just that. Jennifer, I want to talk to you for a minute about how this has evolved over the last 3 to 5 years. There's been an evolution, and Betsy talked about some of those numbers. You know, what do you think about is contributing to this, and what are you seeing firsthand out there?
Well, I do, anecdotally agree with Betsy's analysis that the people have taken their foot off the gas pedal a little bit and kind of think they're done. I think the 30% number got stuck in people's head, unfortunately. So I think we've got to unstuck that particular benchmark for people because that is certainly not the goal. That's for sure. And I think, it is certainly incumbent upon women to get out there and get in the right networks to be known, because the reality is the big companies, I think, do a much better job, right? They are using recruiters. They do feel more pressure to show that they've got more women on their boards and women leading committees. But as you get into mid-size and smaller companies, I think that's where you just really don't see the progress right now. And that's where, they're not using recruiters. They just turn to the person on their left or their right and say, do you know someone? And the person on their left and right probably looks a lot like them. And therefore, they're not accessing the networks that they need to. Because as we all know, there are many very qualified women out there for board leadership. It's not a pipeline issue. So I think there's that dynamic. I think probably on the positive side is for those boards who are working at this, they're starting to look a little more differently about what kinds of women and talent do I need on my board. So this concept of must have been a CEO, must have been from the exact same industry. I think that narrative is changing as the risks that we're assessing as boards and the issues that we're facing become more complex. We're recognizing we need different skill sets. So that bodes well, I think, because we've got women. Well, there's only 5-6% of women in CEO roles, and that number is just the frozen number. It's even worse than board membership or board directors. We do have women in the executive suite. We do have women with deep expertise in some of the areas, ESG, cybersecurity, some of these areas that they're looking for. So I think that's something that we can really leverage to move the numbers, is start to put the spotlight on these wonderful women and hopefully push them forward into the right network so that they can get on some of these boards.
When you talked about those small and mid-cap companies, publicly traded small and mid-cap companies are not going to get the same visibility as large cap. So the large caps, the Walmarts, the Boeings, the GMs, and those guys of the world, the investors are going to look at this and they're going to have a view. So there's more scrutiny at that level. And when Betsy talks about the Russell 3000, the 1000 and the 3000, not all of those are looked at the same way. I think it's an important segue, Ozzie, to come to you and talk about the numbers of women of color on some of these boards and how they're really adding. If you could give us some stats and share with us, and also how they're adding significant value.
There you go. Absolutely. So everything that Jennifer and Betsy have shared are, spot in terms of the opportunities, the challenges that women in the boardroom or prospective women in the boardroom will face. Today, we at LCDA, we advocate that it's important to have a board that is reflective of not only their customer base, but also their employee base. And, women are going to be forced to be reckoned with, and we have data points that show that in today, for example, Latinas make up 18% of the population in 2022. And in 2060, they're projected to be 27%, right? And the numbers that we see of Latinas in the Fortune 1000 board are only at 1.5%. And this can be very similar data points for African-American women, Asian and Pacific Islander. And we are here to ensure that we build a business case that organizations can resonate to. It's the idea of market appropriation, to ensuring that their board reflects what their customer looks like now. In addition to that, what's even more disheartening is overall that projections show that not only in 2022, women are the least represented, but they are projected to be still the least represented years from now. So our data points really show that there is a need to have this perspective in the boardroom, and all the data points, all the business case lead to this makes business sense. So, I encourage everyone that's having conversations with their board, with their C-suite, to say, I don't want to look at your diversity plan. I want to look at your business plan. And what does that look like? And how are these communities part of that business strategy? That's the way that we can continue to have a very focused conversation that leads to results versus like same old, the diversity plan, which we know what it looks like. So we know what everyone's diversity plan looks like. So hopefully those data points bring some light in terms of we have a lot of room to grow and to relate to population size and the business case.
Yeah, that's massive. So in case you guys didn't hear what he said, the Latino population of the United States, 18%. That's 62 million people. That's a lot of people. And so as that number grows, your companies need to be thinking about market. You know, Ozzie said representation on the board has to reflect your market, your customer base, and your employees. There are industries that have significant amounts of Latinos in the employee base, not to mention who are customers. And I think this is a really good segue, Betsy, to talk about, and you're really an expert on this, about how the evolution of women on boards, moving up that value chain I talked about a minute ago, moving from board directors, independent directors, to now board chairs. You have CEOs of major companies who are now board chairs. We've seen a couple in the last week or so. No, I think it's been about 2 weeks ago where we saw some step down. But overall, you're seeing a little bit of a trend up. We've got to make that trend go higher, because when we think about this representation in the market and being competitive and these new risks that we talk about, these are significant. And I'd like to hand it over to you to talk a little bit more. Why is that important today versus maybe 3-5 years ago?
All good points, Marta. And what we've seen, and I'm sure Jennifer will reinforce this as well. What we've seen is that she already said that you don't have to be a CEO any longer to be on a corporate board. Maybe if you're male, you still have to be. I don't know. They've got many more opportunities for networking than a lot of us do. But those women who have become high-level CHROs and also experts in cybersecurity and AI, just recently, these are pathways that allow women to get on corporate boards, because the boards of today, or might still be the boards of yesterday, don't have that expertise, don't understand the environment and sustainability, and don't necessarily understand even the risks that you mentioned early on in your introduction. So women with that expertise that is really important to boards need to be able to say in their high impact statements, we call it, in their precise conversations that they might be having at a cocktail party or a business meeting, to start off with, I'm a business growth expert. I'm an AI expert. I'm a chief human resources officer, and I am a compensation expert. Every board has a compensation committee, a finance and audit committee, and an ESG committee, as well as nominating governments. Not all boards have ESG, and there's some pressure against that, but
That's true. Yeah.
it doesn't matter. At least what matters is that women should be focused on what committees they could serve on when they talk about themselves, and what real value-added expertise they have. So we're seeing a lot more women. There are very few women CEOs of publicly held companies. But women who are CHROs and cybersecurity experts, digital marketing experts, need to say that right up front about themselves.
That's such a good point, because we didn't have to think about that as strongly as we do today 3 years ago. Pre-pandemic, you heard very, very little talk about cyber attacks. You heard very little talk about these kinds of risks. And I wanted to talk to you, Jennifer, because these risks are getting so great. You know, when you talked a minute ago about fit. So you have somebody sitting there on the board and they look to the left and the right and they say, okay, do you guys know a guy? Do you guys know somebody? They're really looking for fit. What's the risk in all of that? As we talk about the numbers, we talk about this expertise, you know, that Betsy was saying we need to have on boards. What's the risk of not going in the right direction here?
Yeah, I would say fit's a very dangerous word. I think we've heard it so much, and we really don't, fit shouldn't be what you're looking for. I mean, you should think of it more like these are pieces of the puzzle. They all look different, but when you put them all together, you're going to get the best solution here in terms of governance. And so I really think that, companies need to be challenging themselves on that front around what do they need around the table. And I think the other dynamic, which is playing into, is just a bit of a shift from do I only need to think about shareholders, or do I need to think about stakeholders? Because if you need to think about stakeholders, and this goes to Ozzie's point, I think, around what is your business plan and who's included in your business plan, and are your stakeholders included in your business plan, and particularly in consumer facing businesses. I think there is pressure for boards to be thinking in broader ways about their business, about their strategy, about the risks that are out there. I mean, the types of social and political issues that boards need to weigh in on now. I mean, you need some of those people around your table if you're going to be able to weigh in on some of these issues, right? People who understand some of these things firsthand. And the other dynamic I think is an important one is also intergenerational. I mean, not just, do you have different ethnic representation or gender, but I think more and more smart companies are realizing that we can't have the average age of the board be, upper 60s, right? Like that's just probably not the right answer. I think you need to really think much more broadly about what's going to give us the best solution here, what is going to challenge us to ask the best questions, because it's gone way beyond just, okay, give me an operational analysis, give me a financial bottom line analysis. If you're only doing that in the boardroom, you're not doing the right thing. So I think there's many dynamics at play today that 5 years ago weren't weighing in as much.
Mm-hmm. And the risks are only getting greater because the operating environment for businesses is getting more and more complex. We talked about so many different levels of issues at the moment. 50 years ago, there was usually one or two issues that a company had to face. Now I could rattle off 6 or 7 for you, just like that they have to face. Combine that with what Jennifer said about the risks of not having the right people in the room, you're going to lose money. You're going to become less competitive, and your competitors are going to outweigh you. To that end, Ozzie, we have 3 incredible organizations represented here. We're looking at I'm looking at the 3 of you as leaders of nonprofit organizations that work to advance a lot of different people, not only on boards, but in the society and in general in business. Can you talk a little bit about, because I've seen you do this over the last 8 months, working with different organizations to empower the entire community. You've done such a great job of it. Can you talk a little bit more about why is that so critical?
Well, absolutely. I mean, over the last several years, organizations like ours have been more at the forefront in the conversation and actually being heard for the first time. And that's a combination of a number of different things. And I look up to Betsy and Jennifer, who have led these organizations very successfully and have done what we want to continue to do, which is convene leaders that are going to make change. And these organizations, at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're making it easier for board influencers to access this incredible talent, right? It's the idea of not only identifying the supply, which is critical, what does the supply look like, but ultimately making it even a better director or prospective director by growing that supply. So what I've learned is that we cannot do this alone. We work with both Betsy and Jennifer, 50/50 Women Board and Women Corporate Foundation, to ensure that we know where we can support each other and just making sure that we have synergies in talent, that we leverage each other's voices, and as well that we can add pressure to organizations to just know that we are here concerned for them leaving money on the table at the end of the day. So our organizations really are driving change and providing a resource that probably wasn't accessible before. I will say specifically to the Latino community and also to the LGBTQ community, both male and female, those are hard communities to source. There's no visible physical characteristics or Hispanic last names or someone having a pride flag on their, tattooed on their arm. And it's about visibility and accessibility. And I feel that's the same that Betsy and Jennifer are doing with their leaders and their people and their members, because this is something that has never been done before. So whenever an organization comes to us and say, I can't find talent, I find that to be very hard to believe, because there's organizations like ours that are making sure that the talent is delivered on a silver platter.
That's wonderful. And one of the things I like about what your organizations are doing is you're not just taking C-suite leaders and making them available to boards. You're actually instructing them on what does good governance look like, what does good board leadership look like. And so as women move up that value chain to board chairs, there's a wealth of knowledge here with these three folks who are doing things to make sure that they're ready for those roles. I want to switch gears a minute and talk about, go ahead, Betsy.
Perfect place to compliment you, because Marta was selected as one of our 50-50 women on boards, our campaign this year that we started for the first time, called 50 Women to Watch for Boards. And Marta was selected because of her outstanding corporate experience. And there were 400 self-nominations, 400 from North America, Canada and Mexico included. And Marta is one of the 50 winners. And to Ozzie's point about the silver platter, she does happen to be a Latina, by the way, but the silver platter, we're presenting those winners, finalists of the whole 400 are winners, but the finalists are the top 50 to companies that don't have women on boards or only have one or two. And we're training the 50 women to watch about what to say about themselves, what value added experience they're bringing. So compliments to you, Marta, for winning that honor.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you.
You are one of those women on the silver platter.
Thank
I
you.
will say, Martha, before you go to the next question, is in the idea of working together. I know I commend 50-50 Women on Board for reaching out to LCDA and knowing that there was a gap in the applications coming in and just say, hey, we want to be very inclusive. So we worked hand in hand with Betsy and her organization to ensure that we rose visibility of this opportunity, because that's what it is at the end of the day. A lot of these opportunities come about where either you're tapped or you don't know about. So awareness is key. And I want to thank Betsy for allowing us to be part of that initiative. And congratulations, Marta.
We want to increase that. The Latinas are the lowest number of women on boards right now.
1%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got to increase that for the benefit of the companies as well as the women.
You know, because the market, we talked earlier about the market, and Jennifer, you tapped in on this as well. You know, if you're not thinking, to use Ozzie's words, about your customer base, your employee base, you're missing out. And here's the thing about Latinos, they're very hardworking and we're incredibly loyal. I mean, we are brand loyal. So you want to get us when we're young, because we will stick with your company forever. I want to switch gears for a minute and talk a little bit about the Supreme Court ruling. We had, there was a lot of press on this, and this relates to ESG and affirmative action. And for those of us who are people of color, you know, we know affirmative action wasn't perfect, but it did open a door that we might not have otherwise had. And I think on this topic, Betsy, it's really become a little bit of a political issue. But for companies, it's about ESG. And for companies who are serious about ESG, and you know several of them, I think it's about being more inclusive and measuring the right things. I think now the EU has, 18 indices if you're going to be a real ESG leader as an S Corp. So there's a lot to really unpack here. But as we think about their recent ruling and how it relates to companies, do you have a view on how that would play out in board leadership and in general leadership for women in general?
You're asking Jennifer or asking?
I was asking you.
Oh, you're asking me.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the pushback on ESG is, of course, misplaced. And to your point, some pressures come to board saying, well, you know, they don't want to be focused on diversity. Well, ESG also means environment and social, which includes digital marketing and digital and cyber, as well as AI, and G, which is governance, which is primary responsibility of a board. So it's misplaced. It's blown way out of proportion. And women who have environment experience, sustainability experience, media experience might fall into the ESG category, but don't let this discourage you. Don't let it discourage you at all. In fact, our research showed that of the new women on boards this last year that I mentioned, 342 of those women who were selected by boards were new seats added to the board. New seats, because boards all tend to say, well, we only can have 13 on our board or 9 or whatever. We don't have room for anybody else, which is just an excuse. A board can add a seat anytime they want to. So don't be discouraged by this invented pushback against ESG. It's just, I like what Larry Fink said, well, we'll just call it something else. But diversity is the bottom line, and diversity is what the other forces are pushing against.
And you're right about it.
I think the other thing to add, sorry, just quickly is,
sure,
this is a US phenomena. I mean, if you go to Europe or other parts of the world, this ship has sailed. They're not rolling back their focus on ESG. So you can't just put your head in the sand. I think that's a pretty short-term strategy. You're certainly not running a global business if you're putting your head in the sand on this issue. And you do have competition. And so I just think that, you know, the good companies are going to continue to focus on what they should be focused on. And I don't think that, you know, you can have parts of the US or companies in the US going down this completely divergent path to where the rest of the world and the rest of investors are going and thinking. So I guess that would be the, you know, one hopefully positive perspective to add around, you know, are we going to totally roll back and go backwards and all of these things?
In a global economy, you can't roll back. And I was going to ask you about the rest of North America, but you answered it well, because we've got to think about ourselves as one unit in a global economy. There is a lot of moving parts to this entire global economy. So Jennifer, put your mic back on, because I do want to talk about AI and cybersecurity. These are risks. These are big risks right in front of boards right now. And we're seeing more and more women come to the table with this experience. We're not seeing boards saying, I need an AI expert on the board. I need a cybersecurity expert on the board. But when something goes wrong, they realize they do need that expertise sitting there. What are your thoughts on this? Because I know you've got a strong background in thinking about both of these areas, and then also the financial view of it as well. How does that impact the ability for boards to really deal with this?
Yeah, I would say certainly, you know, cybersecurity is always top of mind, even more so today. It seems it only gets heightened daily. AI, though, really, that's when there's just such a thirst for education and information amongst board members right now, because, you know, there isn't a lot of experts out there who are directors, I would say. So, you know, that's, you know, we need more of them. But to your point, they need to have the perspective that you, from a governance perspective, that you're looking for. It's, as a director, I need to be thinking about, what are my key risks here, and opportunities too, because I can't think about every little aspect of AI. AI is huge, right? Like it impacts each business in a very different way. So you have to think about the business you're in, and then understand what the key risks and opportunities are, and be asking questions like that. So what we are seeing is a lot of directors who maybe not, you know, AI is not the only thing they do, but they're going and getting educated in that area, and recognizing that for them to be relevant as a director, they've got to know how to ask the right questions when it comes to that, when it comes to cybersecurity. And those two things are not going away. I mean, we just, you know, we talk about new ideas for events and governance education on this all the time. And it just seems there's a new angle constantly that people are looking for. So it's critically important. And I think you can't just have one expert on the board in these areas. Everybody's got to get themselves up to speed. Like, there'll be varying levels of knowledge and education, but everybody's got to have some basic, you know, sort of table stakes ability to ask the right questions and understand some of these issues.
So important, isn't it? And a lot of reports are coming out on AI, that AI is going to take you and make you maybe 30% better in your job, maybe. But there's a layer of critical thinking that can't be solved with it, at least not yet. We can't forget that, because there's a lot of industries that are afraid of AI. It's time to embrace it. It's time to embrace it, because AI, like any technology that has come along, we're afraid at first because we don't understand it. But if you really use it and you think about it and you think about how it can enhance your business, you're going to get the benefit of it before others do. Instead of being a little bit fearful of how it's going to impact your employees and those kind of things. Do you have a comment on that, Jennifer?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, because the pace of change and technological transformation that is occurring right now, I think, is much different today. And so you can't wait. And you think about corporate board meetings, whether they're 4, 5, 6 times a year, depending on the board you're on. That's a huge amount of time, even between board meetings. Some of these issues are moving very, very quickly. So yeah, to sit and wait is not the right answer. You have to sort of jump in, and it is a learning process for most companies. But I think the strategy is certainly you don't want to be a late or a fast follower. I think you want to be right in the fray at the edge here.
No kidding. No kidding. Ozzie, I want to talk a little bit about sports. We are a country that loves its sports. And I know, Betsy, I think you were at the US Open recently. We had an African-American winner, only 19 years old. That hasn't happened since Serena Williams won over 20 years ago. You know, the equity in sports took a very long time, and there was a lot of pushback on it. And, you know, if you think about Megan Rapinoe and all of the work that she did as one athlete to try to move things forward. I even think about Billie Jean King and how much effort Billie Jean King put into it many decades ago. What is your take on all of this, Ozzie? You know, we love our sports. We want our sports to get bigger and brighter. But for some reason, it's just a little bit too hard for us to think about that equal pay for women and women on boards in sports. What do you think?
Well, to see all of this at this time, I have a daughter, 6-year-old daughter, and twin 6-year-old son, and it's very inspiring for them to see individuals on screen that they probably wouldn't have seen years ago. And what I love about what Megan and others are doing is that they're bringing their authentic self and not apologizing about it. Of course, not everyone gets it right. They're going to get backlash. But at the end of the day, it's creating this environment that equality is important, inclusion is even more important, and that we need to ensure that in sports, in business, that we replicate what is right. And the same will happen in the boardroom, where there are articles that are produced related to women being paid less than men on boards, or in the C-suite. And I think it's one of those conversations, as Betsy had mentioned, we had to speak up, right? We had to not only speak up about who we are as leaders, but as well what's important to us. I think, but we have to do it very cautiously. We still have a dynamic in the boardroom that is comprised, significantly of men. And to be able to do it in enough way that doesn't pigeonhole you as someone that will create issues in the boardroom, but comes off at a very thoughtful way. I think that's very true. We have to make sure that we come across in the boardroom as an equal in certain levels, but as well to be very frank and open. That's one thing I will say that I've heard from many, many board members is the first year or two, just listen and ask the question when the question needs to be asked, which is very conflicting to the other side that I've heard, which is don't be a wallflower. Make sure that you're in there providing value from the get-go. So for whoever is the first going into the boardroom, the woman, the Latino, the African-American, there is a lot of pressure that comes behind because they have a community behind them. And the same happens with sports. There's a lot of little girls and little boys that are inspiring to be like Megan and others in Coco. But it's great to see that there's a different way of seeing sports in a more true way. And I think you can replicate that in the boardroom, right? So that's a great place to start to think about sports. And everyone understands sports, or more probably than
we all love it. Right? Yeah, we all love it. And we can't forget the shoulders that we stand on, the generations before us that have worked so hard. I just mentioned 2 women in sports, but there are countless other people whose shoulders that we stand on that have made a path for us a little bit easier. What you're doing, Ozzie, for your twins is making their path a little bit easier. So exponentially, the impact that you're having is really incredible. As we wrap up here, I think it's a good time to really think about all of the risks that boards are facing, all of the risks that the C-suite is facing, all the risks that companies are facing. It's very important here. Exponentially a lot different than 3 to 5 years ago. And of course, many years ago, back 50 years ago. If you think about this, like all of our panelists have said today, this requires a different type of leadership, a type of leadership that has much more deep thinking in issues that we weren't talking about a couple years ago, AI, cybersecurity, all of these things. And the markets, we talked about markets and the commercialization and how those markets are impacting businesses. Who's on your board? Do they represent your customer base? Do they represent the people who work for you? Are you getting contracts with these communities that will help your company grow for the next many, many years? As we close out, Betsy, Jennifer, and Ozzie, give us your top thinking about what we need to do next, and then we'll close it out and go from there.
I'd say education, how to get on a corporate board is primary for all of the women in the audience. We offer workshops on our website. Our next Get On Board workshop is next week, and you learn how to talk about yourself, how to strategically network, how to find a board seat, your first board seat, and not be wondering where the next steps are. Take your own action and be proactive.
So important. Jennifer?
Yeah, well, I agree with Betsy, but I think I would add that we do need to work collectively. It's really important for organizations like the three of ours and others to keep the pressure on, because this is moving way too slowly. So it's incumbent upon people like us to continue to put pressure on companies and on policymakers on this front.
Keep the pressure on. Ozzie, final words.
Last thing is take the call, influence the pipeline, ensure that you are ready to say 10 female, 10 Latinos, whatever your flavor is or community you align with, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to be in the room and keep on doing it. You know, you have to kiss a couple of frogs, you know, you might not be the right one for that right role, but it's going to have results. So take the call and influence the pipeline.
Take the call, influence the pipeline, and contribute to women moving up the value stream on boards. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.